want to bring a word of hope to our world right now. We want to tell people a story that will help them understand their own story. That's why we're going to walk through the book of Exodus. In this study, we want to take a look at what it looks like to live as an alien and a stranger in this world. We'll be looking at sections from Exodus 2 and Hebrews 11. You ready? Let's go. So we've been walking through the book of Exodus together in our worship and our Bible studies and some video podcasts that I've been posting. Again, just trying to bring hope to God's people. And as we go back a little bit in Exodus chapter 2, I want to just pause and think about where we are and where you are in your lives right now. I think one of the things that I've noticed as I meditate on Exodus and as I think about where I am at and where I think many people are at in their lives is that we got a little bit too comfortable. And I don't mean to say that in a bad way, but I think as Christians, one of the things that I've noticed is that we started to make this place, this world, like it was our place. Like we started to live like this was where we belonged. We started to lose who we were. And I think that's one of the things that's happened is over the course of time, we grew very comfortable and happy about, and for good reasons, the life that the Lord had given us. The sports, the events, the entertainment, the eating out, all the things that we love as Christians who also live in America. We grew very, very comfortable and very, very happy. And it was very, very easy for us to live like we didn't belong here. Like we were permanent instead of just temporary. Like this was the place where we belonged. I think it's very, very easy for us to lose ourselves, to lose our identity, to forget who we are, and more importantly, to forget whose we are. And that's one of the things I want to look at with you today as we look at Moses' parents and then at Moses as they lived in the land of Egypt. Now, to just put this into perspective for you, the ancestors, the grandparents, the great-grandparents, and all the way on, they've been living in Egypt for a really, really long time at this point. This is where they had been making their home for a really, really long time. They were living in Egypt, though that was not where they were from. It was now where Abraham and Isaac and Jacob set down their roots. But here they were in Egypt, in a foreign land, making a home there, and it would have been very easy for them to take on Egyptian customs and Egyptian comforts and Egyptian gods and all those things that went along with it. And that's one of the things I want you to notice about Moses and his parents, is that they lived in the land of Egypt, but they never actually made it their home. It doesn't seem like, at least, that they lost themselves. I want to start by looking with you at Moses' parents briefly, and then we'll look at Moses. So if you've got your Bibles, open up to Exodus chapter 2. I want to read it to you now. Now, a man of the tribe of Levi married a Levite woman, and she became pregnant and gave birth to a son. When she saw that he was a fine child, she hid him for 3 months. But when she could hide him no longer, she got a papyrus basket for him and coated it with tar and pitch. Then she placed the child in it and put it among the reeds along the bank of the Nile. His sister stood at a distance to see what would happen to him. Then Pharaoh's daughter went down to the Nile to bathe, and her attendants were walking along the riverbank. She saw the basket among the reeds and sent her female slave to get it. She opened it and saw the baby. He was crying, and she felt sorry for him. "This is one of the Hebrew babies," she said. Then his sister asked Pharaoh's daughter, "Shall I go and get one of the Hebrew women to nurse the baby for you?" "Yes, go," she answered. So the girl went and got the baby's mother. Pharaoh's daughter said to her, "Take this baby and nurse him for me, and I will pay you." So the woman took the baby and nursed him. When the child grew older, she took him to Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son. She named him Moses, saying, "I drew him out of the water." I want you to notice something about Moses' parents. They were children of Levi, which was one of the sons of Jacob. They were sons, great-grandsons, and daughters of Levi, and they gave birth to Moses, and they saw that he was a fine child, and she hid him for 3 months. See, put this in context. Pharaoh had given an order that all the baby boys should be killed, that all of the baby boys of Israel should be thrown into the river Nile. And that is precisely what Moses' parents refused to do. They noticed that he was a fine child. They noticed that he was no ordinary child. But I want you to understand that this wasn't that Moses' parents just looked at Moses and said, oh, this is a good-looking kid. It wasn't just that Moses' parents looked at him and recognized that this was a good kid, that he was a good-looking, strong young man. It wasn't that they noticed that there was something special about his future. It wasn't that at all. I want you to keep your finger in Exodus, because we're going to come right back. But I want you to look with me briefly at Hebrews chapter 11. And I want you, verse 23, Hebrews 11, verse 23. And I want you to see what's going on in the hearts of Moses' parents. Verse 23, by faith, Moses' parents hid him for 3 months after he was born because they saw he was no ordinary child. So again, the writer of the Hebrews is noticing and reflecting on Moses' parents understood that there was something about Moses, but that's not it. And they were not afraid of the king's edict. See, that's the bigger thing here. It wasn't that they just noticed who Moses was. It's that they knew who their God was. And so they feared their God more than they feared the king. They put their trust in their God more than they were afraid of what the king was going to do. See, Moses' parents, they never forgot who they were. They always remembered that they were the children of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob. They always remembered that they were children of the promise, the covenant that God had made with his people hundreds of years before this. They always remembered who their God was. They always remembered the promise of God that God was going to one day bring them back up out of Egypt. See, they never lost who they were. They always remembered the promise, and they lived in faith, not in fear. I want to read on and help you notice some things about Moses. Verse 11. One day after Moses had grown up, he went out to where his own people were and watched them in their hard labor. Let me just pause there for a second. Remember, Moses had been taken by Pharaoh's daughter out of his home. He was nursed by his mother, but then raised by Pharaoh's daughter. So he grew up in the house of the Pharaoh. He grew up in the school of the Pharaoh. He was taught all the Egyptian things, taught all about the Egyptian gods, taught the Egyptian language, all the things that went along with being a child of the king, a child of the Pharaoh, the comforts, the religion, the politics, all of the things that went along with that. Moses grew up there, but did you notice it? Moses never lost himself. He went out to where his own people were and watched them at their hard labor. I'll continue. He saw an Egyptian beating a Hebrew, there it is again. Moses wants us to know that he never forgot who he was, one of his own people. Looking this way and that and seeing no one, he killed the Egyptian and hid him in the sand. The next day he went out and saw 2 Hebrews fighting. He asked the one in the wrong, "Why are you hitting your fellow Hebrew?" The man said, "Who made you ruler and judge over us? Are you thinking of killing me as you killed the Egyptians?" Then Moses was afraid and thought, "What I did must have become known." When Pharaoh heard of this, he tried to kill Moses, but Moses fled from Pharaoh and went to live in Midian, where he sat down by a well. We'll let you read on your own. But do you see? Do you see that Moses never forgot who he was? Do you see that Moses always remembered where he came from? Moses never viewed himself as a child of Jacob take that back. Moses never saw himself as a child of Pharaoh. Yeah, that's where he slept, and that's where he ate, and that's where he went to school. That's all the things that went along with growing up. That's where Moses went. But Moses never saw himself as a child of the Egyptians. He saw himself as a child of the one true king. And that becomes all the more clear. Again, go back to the book of Hebrews, and I want you to see that even more clearly. Hebrews 11, verse 24. Notice how intentional and purposeful Moses is to always remember who he was. Verse 24. By faith, when he had grown up, notice the strong word that the writer uses, refused to be known as a daughter of Pharaoh. So Moses is making a very conscious, careful choice about his identity. I am not going to be known as Pharaoh's daughter. I'm going to be known as a child of the one true king. He chose, again, notice that word, he chose to be mistreated along with the people of God rather than to enjoy the fleeting pleasures of sin. So Moses is making a choice. He's going to live like a child of the one true king rather than a child of Pharaoh. And notice that it would have been far more comfortable for Moses to live as a child of the Pharaoh. But he chose to be mistreated. He chose to live as a child of God and to be mistreated along with it, even though it would have been more fun from a human perspective to live as more fun and more comfortable to live as a child of Pharaoh. Okay? Verse 26. He regarded disgrace for the sake of Christ as far greater value than the treasures of Egypt because he was looking ahead to his reward. See, Moses, the writer says, has had a very clear faith. In his mind, he almost seems to be thinking that I could have had a good life. I could have had all the treasures of Egypt. But what's more valuable to me? To have the treasures of Egypt, or to have all the treasures of my heavenly reward, which God will give me one day? And that's what Moses chose. He regarded disgrace. That's better, right? Disgrace is better, he says, because of the reward. By faith, he left Egypt. So this is when Moses runs away from Pharaoh. He left Egypt, not fearing the king's anger. He persevered because he saw him who is invisible. See, Moses clearly understood who he was and who his God was, and he never forgot it. And he made careful, purposeful, intentional, even painful decisions because of who he was. It would have been very easy for the parents of Moses and for Moses himself to lose who he was, to lose who they were, but they didn't. And so I want to make just a few applications to you and to me as we think about this right now. I want to apply some of this to our own hearts and lives. What is it? Here's my question. How do we live as foreigners and aliens? What are the core values? What are the beliefs that God gives us in His Word that affect and really impact the way that we live right here and right now in this world? I've been coming back to these things again and again because I think there are two things. I'm going to give you a list of three, but I want to start with two. There are two things that impact the way we live and the way we act and the way we treat other people in this world more than anything else, and it's this: who am I and who is my God? Who am I and who is my God? I think if you and I, if we have a clear understanding of our identity, who am I, and who our God is, whose am I, if I have clear answers to those questions, then that really helps me see my life in a new way and live my life in a new and a free way. So who am I? Well, by faith in Jesus, because of the blood that was shed on the cross, I'm a child of the one true King. I'm a child of God. And I am not defined by what people think about me. I am not defined by the job that I do. I'm not defined by anything of the here and now. I'm not defined by anything in this world. The things of this world are fleeting and they're passing away. What's of greater value to me is what's coming for me in heaven. What's of greater value to me is what God has given me through his son Jesus. Right? Who am I and whose am I? Because I'm a child of the one true King, I belong to him. And he's my king, and I'm his son. He's our king, and we're his subjects. We're his children. And what that means is that the king, Jesus, is on his throne. And he's living and he's ruling and he's reigning over everything in my life, and he's has his eye on one of our songs says he has his eye on the sparrow, right? So if my king has his eye on the sparrow and he cares about the sparrow and he cares about the hairs of my head, the king also cares about me, and he rules for the good of his subjects. So you see, it's good to be a child of one true king. And that has a huge impact on the way that I live my life. So we're going to live in faith, not in fear. Right? We're not going to live our lives afraid of what if. We're not going to live our lives afraid of what's going to happen. I've heard some people say these days that if it's my time, it's my time. And while I trust that the Lord will take me home to heaven and that my times are in his hands, I don't want to be careless. So I'm going to live by faith, not out of fear. I'm going to make good, wise, careful decisions. I'm going to follow the recommendations to the best of my abilities. I'm going to wash my hands. I'm going to keep my social distance. I'm going to do all the things that people tell me are wise and good, not because I'm afraid, but because it's wise. And I'm going to live trusting God. I'm not going to go to the grocery store and panic buy because I'm worried about what if they shut down everything and I can't get to the grocery store. I'm not going to live my life in fear. I'm going to live my life trusting God. I'm going to be wise. I'm going to be smart. I'm going to make good decisions and smart decisions. I'm not going to do it out of fear. I'm going to do it because I trust God to take care of me. I'm going to do everything. This is my second point. I'm going to do everything out of love for other people. So the decisions that I make, the things that I do, I'm going to do because I love people. So many people in this world are worried about themselves. They're worried about their own health. They're worried about their own finances. They're worried about their own well-being. And to a certain extent, we do have to be concerned. We do have to make plans for the good of our families, for the good of ourselves. But as children of the one true King, that's part of being wise and smart and managing what God has given us to the best of our abilities. But children of the one true King, they don't live for themselves, but first they live for him who died for them, and then they live for other people. Right? My life is not about me, it's for him and it's for other people. So the life of a Christ follower is love for other people above everything else, right? First, love for God, then love for my neighbor, and then love for myself comes last. I'm last in the list, you see. So we live out of faith, not out of fear. We make smart decisions, but we trust God in them. We love other people. And the last thing I want to say is, as children of the one true God, when there are things of which we should be and can be afraid, we shelter in the Lord. I want to read to you from Psalm 27. For in the day of trouble, he will keep me safe in his dwelling. At the end of the day, children of God, they find their safety and they find their security in their God and in their safekeeping. Again, who am I? Who are you? And whose am I? Whose are you? We are safe in his keeping. The Lord has surrounded us with his mighty power. to protect us from harm and danger. And if God in his love and wisdom for us should decide not, or if God in his love and wisdom for us should decide that some harm or pain will come to us, it's because he loves us and it's good for us, though we don't always understand why. We shelter in the Lord, who in all things desires what is the very, very best for his children. So you see, what does it mean? What does it look like to live in this world as an alien and a stranger? It simply means this: to always remember who we are, and always to remember whose we are, and to let the answers to those two questions determine and guide the way that we live in this world as aliens and strangers. This coming up on Sunday, we are going to walk into Exodus chapter 3 and chapter 4. We're going to go pretty quickly and cover some of it rather quickly. So perhaps read ahead a little bit. We want to see how God called Moses into this hard time for the Israelites, called him to lead them out. And what I want you to start thinking about, what has God called us as Christians in this world? What has God called us to in this world? How are we to live? How are we to act? What are we to do? What is God calling us to in this moment for the people of our world and the people of our communities? Thanks for being with me today, and I hope to hear from you soon. Please let me know in the comments below. Let me know. Let us know if this is serving you well, if you're enjoying this, if the audio and video quality is good. We want to know best how to get God's word to you, and we want to know if this is serving you well. For more audio or video content, please check out our website, themountmke.org. You could always subscribe to our YouTube channel below. We're happy to have you with us. Please let us know how we can get more content to you, what kind of things we can say, share with you, and ways we can share them with you. Have a great day.